Let us begin. I want to say thank you very much to Vikram for coming to undergo his Grok Gauntlet. It's really nice to meet you. This is the first time that I have met you.
I appreciate you taking the time.
I've heard a number of things about you. I want to see if they come true.
There you go. I hope they're good.
So I don't, usually when we interview people, it's what I call micro interviews, very short,
Okay.
3 questions or so. But I get to say thank you for spending 2 hours with us.
Perfect.
So the way that we'll do this, we generally do a round robin, which will be a very small round with us tonight. We are going to be recording. We've already had a number of people come in. We've had other of your opponents who have just blown us off. I guess they have written off the conservative liberty freedom wing of the party.
Why is that? Just I'm curious.
I would say, well,
just because they don't want to hear what you guys have to say. I mean, this is a two-way dialogue. I think your questions tell me something.
Yep, I think they. I could say and pat myself on the back and say they fear us. Well,
no disrespect. I'm not fearful. Should I be?
Sometimes.
Maybe ask that question toward the end of the.
There you go. We'll come back to it.
Yeah. And the part of it is I don't think that these are mostly establishment people like Chuck Morse.
Gotcha.
They don't respect our viewpoints.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. I really do. This whole idea that somehow people from outside the establishment are lesser. I mean, I'm an outsider, right? I'm definitively an outsider.
This time around, you certainly are.
And I will always be an outsider. I wrote a book called Think for Yourself. I will never listen to what I'm told to do. I think my own way based on my own sets of values and beliefs. So, but yes, I'm an outsider.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if you stick around for a while. And then we will make a judgment thereof.
Fine.
Or therein.
That's all.
So,
that's reasonable.
We will ask the questions. You can always ask clarifying questions in
Perfect.
return.
Okay.
We try to keep these a little bit moving quickly because we want to ask a lot of questions. But if you think that you wish to explain something in more detail, that's fine.
Okay.
To a point.
Okay.
Because
cut me off.
This time we're doing things differently. Normally we do the videos so that those who can't be here of the Groksters being those authors associated with Granite Grok who can't be here.
Okay.
For instance, we have a lot of people down in the lower tier of the state, and it's a hike. So they can view it, and then what we do afterwards is that we line up all the candidates for a particular race, and we add one more called no endorsement in this race.
Okay.
And everybody gets a vote to see whether or not a particular candidate or no endorsement in this race wins.
Okay.
And then I announce that. I classify myself often as being the benevolent dictator of Granite Grok because I have for years waited for some kind of collusion between the writers that say, okay, in this case, we're going to vote for Maggie Hassan. At which point I say, yeah, I'm overruling you. Here's who it's going to be.
So everyone has an equal vote, but he gets a multiplied vote, right?
Perfect.
Well, only if something like that happens.
Right.
I have no multiplier.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And I think you know a bunch of guys on my team. Is that right?
I know Todd.
And Mike Bionda?
I know Mike Bionda. I've known him for years. He and his former sidekick and Granite Grok were part of the co-founding members of the New Hampshire Tea Party Coalition back in 2010, 2011.
And I think also, do you know Rob Barcelona?
Sounds familiar, but I'd have to see the face.
Gotcha.
I'm horrible at names.
Gotcha.
So
No,
if
I've met so many people over the last
there's actually
few months that I also am getting horrible with.
It's hard to keep them all straight.
It is hard.
There's actually a name for that,
It's
which I
very
can't
hard.
remember, that Ian Underwood, who writes for us, came up with. I said, that explains why I can't remember people's names. You know, I mix up my son number 1, son number 2, my grandson, and 3 or 4 of the dogs that aren't around anymore.
I got it.
So let me start off with the quintessential question I always ask everybody.
Perfect, go ahead.
What is the proper role of government? Why does it exist? And what is your role if you were to succeed in getting the nomination and then going down to DC?
Yeah. Look, I'm a big believer in limited government. I think government should have to do as little as possible to assure that we all have freedom, liberty, and are able to live our lives the way we want. I think there is a role for government. I don't think I'm not an anti-government guy. I believe that government should do things like provide the rules and laws to be able to allow others to operate with other human beings in society, where there isn't sort of infringement of rights, protection of rights, that kind of stuff. And in a global context, I think that there's some role for the U.S. government to make sure that we have security and safety of our way of life and our values are protected, to be able to live how we wish here in our country. So.
Okay.
Well, my global question is, who are you and why are you running?
So I will always answer that question, Norman, this way. I'm the son of two working class immigrants who came to this country seeking a better life. I am literally the embodiment of the American dream, in the sense that my parents, actually I should say my parents had lived the American dream. It's probably a better way to say it if you're really thinking about it. The American dream being what? Being able to provide your children more opportunities than you did, right? In this American land that offered nothing but opportunities. And so I think of myself first and foremost as the son of two working class immigrants.
And where did they immigrate from?
You know, it's an interesting question by itself, and here's why. It should be a seemingly easy question. My dad says he was a refugee fleeing India to go to India. Now, it sounds like it's not quite real there, right? But there's a statement there, because it was India, and then in 1947, the Brits drew a line.
And there was partition.
And then there was a post-partition. My dad was, he and his family were Hindus living in what became known as West Pakistan. Of course, East Pakistan became Bangladesh, and West Pakistan became Bangladesh.
Just so you know, I have a former law partner whose father and mother were on the last train from Pakistan into India. They were Hindus also. And came to this country and were very successful.
So you understand this dynamic, yeah. So what happened was my parents were, both of my parents, separately, my mother and her family, my dad and his family, they both ended up, I believe, walking down to the Karachi harbor. And my dad describes it as getting in the hull of a cargo boat. And he was probably 12, 13, I forget what he would have been.
Well, because they were killing Hindus.
Killing, genocide.
Yeah,
you're a Hindu, we're gonna kill you. That's it, right? Extermination. And so he and his family went down to the Karachi harbor. He got in some cargo boat. He says he couldn't see the sea, rocking boat, this and that. A couple days later, after getting get a slice of bread every 3 hours or 4 hours. Every now and then he'd get butter, every now and then some jam, but that was about it. And they got to a refugee camp basically in Mumbai. But back then it was called Bombay. Right. And then he made his way through Africa as a manual laborer. My dad worked for an Indian entrepreneur, and then he gets the golden ticket, as he calls it, to the United States. He came in on an education visa. This was probably before they figured out how to utilize real estate to its highest and best use, because in the middle of Manhattan, there was, I think it was Reynolds Technical Institute or something like that, where my dad got himself a 2-year associate's degree in automotive technical education. So he became an auto mechanic. And as a result of that, he took a couple years to get that 2-year degree. Took more than the time allocated, but that's because he was driving a cab, he was working at a hotel, doing what he could to make ends meet. But he did get through, and then he also managed to get his green card. And when he got his green card, he went back to India and he told his parents, this is an amazing land. It doesn't matter what your parents did. It actually doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter your money. You get all these opportunities.
There's no caste system. Not formally.
Effectively what he found and what was so shocking to him. And they said, that's great. You can live in America. We wish you well. We'll come visit. You'll come visit. But you can't be single. So you'll marry her before you go back. And so literally he meets my mother, I think a day or two later they're married, and a day or two after that she's with him in America. And it's sort of like, I think about that as wow for my father, but oh my God for my mother. Yeah. Who am I to judge? They've been married 54 years now. something like that. So yeah. So anyway, I know it's a weird way to answer the question, but you ask who I am. That's who I am.
So you were born in this country?
Yeah, I was born here. I was born in New York. Grew up in New Jersey. College in Connecticut. And sort of traveled. I went to Yale.
Okay.
I did my undergraduate work at Yale.
I promise I was going to say I won't hold that against you.
Yeah. So that is, we can come back to that whole deal. But no, I mean, I'm happy to give you more of my story, if that's helpful. But, a couple of formative moments early in life that really influenced who I am and my values and my belief system. One was my dad eventually started his own business. He started he had a gas station. This was back before the dealership monopoly on repairing cars. Mm-hmm. My dad, he was in the garage, he'd be fixing cars, and I would remember pumping gas there on the weekends on high school. And anyway, during the recession of 1990, that business goes belly up. And when it goes belly up, it's not just a business failure, it's a personal bankruptcy and a personal foreclosure of our family home. And that was kind of discombobulating, as you might imagine, for someone in your teenage high school years. My parents did a wonderful job of shielding me. It's only in retrospect where lay on the couch and remember what went wrong in life, and that you start remembering these things. But my mother said one thing, and this was really perhaps the most influential thing that ever happened to me. And it's something I tell every parent, every grandparent. Listen, drizzle this positivity and little tidbits of wisdom to kids, because you never know, you never know what will stick. So my mother said, oh, sorry, should I be sitting back?
No.
Okay.
You're good.
So my mother said one thing. She said, you can lose what's in your pockets. Don't worry about filling them. We lost what was in our pockets in India. We lost it again here. You put your head down, you work hard, don't worry about handouts, and you move forward. And that'll work out. And she went further, and this is the tidbit that changed my life, I think. She said, don't worry about filling your pockets. Focus instead on filling your head. And, like a lot of high school boys, I thought my destination in life was to be a professional athlete. Yeah, a little bit of reality stuck it came forth, and that didn't work out. Mm-hmm. But I was able to study, and I was good at it. And so when I put my head down, I found I got myself scholarships to Yale. Took out some student loans, which, I was the chump who paid them back, right?
Me too.
I want to know where my check is. If they're giving money out, I want mine. I'm against government handouts, but heck, if you're handing it out, I want my share. Anyway, before we go there, another very formative moment took place, which will, again, very much help you understand who I am in my life and my values. 1989, Tiananmen Square happened, and I remember being glued to watching this happen. And I just said to myself, what kind of evil regime would attack its own people? And so when I went to Yale as an undergrad, I studied East Asian Studies. I spent my summers working at the American Enterprise Institute down in Washington, D.C., a conservative think tank, working with former U.S. Ambassador to China, Jim Lilly. He was the ambassador in Beijing during Tiananmen Square. So it was a really cool experience to be able to, and I worked with him on a couple of projects, which shockingly turned into be both my senior essays in college, but are still relevant today, 30 years later. The South China Sea territorial dispute, the Chinese military modernization and their surge south, the role of deception in Chinese military philosophy and how they would progress in sort of global affairs. All of them still relevant. Anyway, I bring that up because China is a really major part of my worldview today, and I think that they continue to be an evil regime, the biggest threat to the American way of life, and we need to protect and insulate from that risk. So we can come back to that. But after Yale, worked for 6 years in finance, paid off some college loans, got married. My wife went to grad school. While she was in grad school, I helped, we were sort of tag teaming, and then when she finished grad school, I went to grad school. And then after grad school, I went into business. So,
what kind of business are you in?
So I have a handful of businesses today. Historically, it's all been around finance, financial analytics, and strategic advice around that. But today I've wound down a couple as I ramp this up. One, I started a business consulting firm that provides strategic advice to corporate boardrooms, large, gigantic companies that are worried about regulatory risk around the world, geopolitical risk, supply chain risk, inflation, commodity access risk, etc., freight rates, big global trends. And so we've had a small number of people helping me on that team, probably 5 or 6 at its peak. That's basically been ramped down, one other person helping me today. I started an investment business where we had a handful of analysts and a couple others helping me analyze investment opportunities, working with a couple of small families to help them deploy capital, and really an idea thing. And then I had a training business where I helped individuals go off and, the way I describe it is this: Fortune 500 companies have large dollars they deploy towards training, and they turn around, and so I am providing strategic advice to the CEO in the boardroom, and then the next tier down, the CEO would say, one of these 30 guys or gals is going to be the next CEO. We just don't know which one. So we want you to help start getting them to think strategically, globally, the way I do and the way you help me think through. Start it now. And so I would go in and do executive education sessions. Blast is not really a business, it's just something I've done on the side. I've always taught. It's my way of giving back. Look, I've been blessed to have opportunities. My way to give back is to spend some time, and I've done that at the university level, where I've taught finance and finance and economics, business ethics and governance, and then I've taught more recently global affairs. So that's a little bit of what I've done, and that teaching plus the consulting resulted in me writing a little bit and becoming a content producer. So I would, for a couple of years, 2015 to 17, I wrote a weekly piece, had a large number of subscribers, grew that up. At one point there were millions of people reading stuff I wrote, syndicated, distributed, Forbes, Fortune, PBS, a whole bunch of different places, just took whatever I wrote. But I also wrote a couple books. One book on finance and financial bubbles called Boom Bustology. Another book called Think for Yourself, subtitled Restoring Common Sense in an Age of Experts and Artificial Intelligence. Which was I
assume you've read Extraordinary Popular Delusions of the Madness.
Of course I have. Of course I have, yes. Yeah. I have. There's a lot of great stuff out there on bubbles and the dynamics thereof. But yes.
And we never seem to learn.
No, look, it's human nature. At the root of this problem of bubbles, I will tell you, I think the Fed plays a major role. We can come back to that if you want. But fundamentally, this is just human emotion volatility between greed and fear, greed and fear, greed and fear. And then there's this psychology of sort of keeping up with the Joneses. Well, nothing more painful. I'm happy to lose money, but if I'm not making money and you are, let me tell you, I got to get in on that action. It's just, there's this magnet, it just pulls you in.
I have some tulip bulbs I have for sale for you.
Well, there we go back.
All right, Skip.
All right.
But you didn't tell me why you're running.
Oh, sure. Sorry, let me go back.
Why are you running?
Yeah. So, like a lot of folks, I'm really upset with where we are as a nation. I'm really disturbed by our role in the world. I'm really disturbed at what's happening to my personal family and the dynamics we all are feeling and facing on almost a daily basis. My book, Think for Yourself, one of the key insights that I went out there talking about, this was written before the pandemic, was we have to keep experts on tap, not on top. Meaning they all have a role, but they live in their silo and they understand this world better. But that doesn't give them knowledge and applicability everywhere. And so, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was you got a public health expert. Fine, they have a public health perspective. By definition, the opposite of individual rights. By definition, you're caring about the group. You're not caring about individual. I care about me. And so when you start thinking about that logic, I was out there pretty early talking to people. I was like, look, what's the cost of a missed mammogram? I don't know, but it wasn't zero. What was the cost of people not getting their teeth cleaned? I don't know, it wasn't zero. And what was the cost of keeping kids out of school? I have a daughter with special needs. Let me tell you, Zoom doesn't work.
I know
it didn't work.
We are raising our grandson because of various reasons. And he is one that learns tactile.
Yes.
He was diagnosed with FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome.
Okay.
Long story. So he has developmental issues, and the worst thing was learning at a kindergarten, preschool level, rather than being socially involved physically.
Yes.
So I understand where you're coming from with this.
It is horrifying what's been done. I mean, I think the ripple effect that this will have produced on that generation will be scarring at a level people have no appreciation of. My wife actually started a Montessori school, and so she's run that. She doesn't run it anymore. She's just sitting on the board. But the data she was able to show me, literally 6 months into the pandemic, was overwhelmingly convincing that even the masks were screwing up creating developmental confusion, because kids interpolate emotion through facial expressions. Like all the basic, it seems obvious to all of us now, but like back then this was like, what is going on? Like it is infuriating. And my book was written before, but it came out right at the beginning. So I had a lot of media things. I'm like, look, the mask mandate, like, so you see people walking on a beach by themselves wearing a mask, like, people know, like this is
a car
like, by themselves. It's like what's going on? All right, so sorry, I got a little distracted. Why am I running?
No, you'd be a good blogger. We're forever going different directions. So to bring that back.
So let me finish about why I was running. So that's number one. I think the expert overreach, absolutely infuriating. I've just written a book about it. I find it absolutely disturbing that we still are like lemmings as a society. I blame us, honestly. We shouldn't have been so susceptible and willing to let this happen. I found it stupefying that actually occurred, but it did, right? We're like lemmings. By the way, it's still true in so many walks of life at a micro level, not even at the macro level. I know plenty of people who will go see a doctor says do this, and they're like, it doesn't make sense for me, but the doctor said. No, you yourself individually know. I'm a big believer that we all know best for us. So that's number one, expert overreach. Number two, I've spent literally 30 years in business thinking about inflation, supply chains, and other dynamics, and surprise, surprise, these issues are relevant today. I'm a global guy. I spent a lot of time around the world working with companies, 70 some odd nations that I've spent time on the ground with. I think today we have some real concerns, and then China. So given the issues of the day, the experience I had, the ultimate anger, and the worry, honestly, if we define American dream as your parents, parents offering their kids a better set of opportunities, well, I'm worried about my American dream. I'm worried whether my kids are going to have the same set of opportunities. Again, I have a 16-year-old daughter with some special needs and an 11-year-old son. Both are doing really well now. They're doing well. They're back at it. It's all going in the right direction. But that ripple didn't feel good.
Okay, good.
So that's why I'm running. Because I think I have something to offer. I think I've got a set of skills, a set of experiences, a background that's unique, and a visceral appreciation on a very personal level as to what and why we all feel the way we do. And I want to represent us to go, fight back effectively.
Okay. A couple nitty-gritty questions.
Yeah, please.
For me. It could be a very short answer. It could be an extremely long one. We are the live free or die state. I moved up here for a job, stayed for the live free or die ethos.
Yep.
And as you know, New Hampshire has a very large libertarian type streak. Otherwise, could be categorized as the Just Leave Us Alone coalition.
Yeah, I was just on the phone with Jeremy Kaufman recently.
Okay. So the question comes up.
Love it.
Who are you? I oftentimes categorize our federal delegation as the federal ambassadors to New Hampshire.
Yep.
Which should tell you kind of what I think their mindset is because of the way their behavior.
Yep.
Would you ever sign on to or create any legislation that would violate the New Hampshire Constitution?
So that's a tough question because I haven't imagined the scenarios where that could occur. So I'd want you to explain, give me more information in terms of where and how that could transpire.
Well, that's now going to be part of your homework.
Yes, fine. I will do that homework. I don't imagine, but again, I want to fully appreciate the question before I flippantly answer.
Well,
what I can say is this. I fully appreciate the New Hampshire live free or die logic. I do believe in less government, limited government. I think the role of federal government should be constrained. If and when the government is needed, the state should be the default destination of where closest to the people. New Hampshire has a certain population with a distribution of beliefs that I think is effectively, the right way for those beliefs to get implemented into the laws that affect the people is through the local, as close to local as possible, right? And so states seem logical. I'll do the homework.
Okay.
That's what I can promise you.
I hope you will. And I'm going to do a follow-up question,
Sure.
which has become more and more important.
Yeah.
It's a triad type question.
Okay.
The definition of a home rule state, the definition of a Dillon's rule state, and how do those fit into the philosophy of federalism?
So I don't understand the question because I don't understand those words. So I need you to help me understand that.
Okay. Home rule state, this is coming into the educational standpoint for me. I am suing the Guilford School Board over this.
Gotcha.
A home rule state is a state where a local entity, a local subdivision of the state, town, city, school board, whatever, can set whatever regulations it wants as long as it doesn't violate state law or federal law.
Okay.
A Dillon's rule state, because there was a Judge Dillon back in the Wild West.
Gotcha.
In Iowa.
Yep.
Okay.
Who said that the local subdivisions of the state can only do those things that the state legislature has delegated their power to do. So
I got it. I got the question.
No state law, you cannot do. Period.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's almost affirmative versus a negative set of rights and rules, if you will. So you can do anything other than what we tell you. You cannot do, or you only can do what we let you do.
Right.
Correct.
That's effectively the question.
And the states, of the 50 states, they're divided up. Some are Dillon rule states, some are home rule states.
Yeah,
and home rule being you're free to do whatever you want as long as it's not prohibited.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah,
There's
that
about
seems the right way.
32 to 36 Dillon rule states.
Yeah, look, in that basic framing of it, it seems home rule is the right way.
Well, except that New Hampshire is a Dillon rule state.
It is.
Yes.
So you can only do what's
The general
allowed
court
to
authorizes you to
you
do.
as a local,
Correct.
whatever level you
So
are given the freedom.
there's statutes that allow for establishment of budget committees, that allow for land use regulation by planning boards. All that stuff is embodied in statutes adopted by the general court that delegate to the local municipalities what they can do.
Yeah, and the general court being the state legislature, not an actual court with a judge.
We call the legislature, which is the Senate and the House of Representatives, is referred to in the state constitution as the general court.
Gotcha. Yeah. Look, as a candidate for federal office, I haven't paid as much attention to some of these dynamics, but sure.
Well, the reasons for the question is that it's extremely important to us because we don't see it with most of our federal delegation, be they Democrat or Republican, that understand that nuance.
Okay.
And it should have a direct impact on how you view, or at least if you were to be our guy down there, I would be holding you accountable.
Sure.
And I have made people who have gone down there think that they're going to get re-election. I've made them lose.
Yep.
Because when you make a promise,
sure,
I expect you to keep it.
I think that's
and
reasonable.
I'll write about you every single day. Because you have to win 50% plus 1. All I have to do is change between 0.1 and 0.5% of the people in your district.
Got it.
Or any given district.
Sure.
And I've got a slew of people we've done that to. That's not as a warning, I'm not saying anything, but it's that important to us. And it's important to our readership. Because if you sign on to legislation that violates, and I want to hear what you have to say about federalism.
Yeah.
But we want you to be our representative. That means you need to know how this state works politically.
Of course. So here's the interesting thing, and I think this is philosophically you'll understand my approach, and that might be helpful to get some color around this question. So I was recently, it's going to sound off course, but I'll bring it right back. I was elected to the board of a large trucking company called Werner Enterprises. You'll see their trucks everywhere.
Yes.
We got a lot of them running all over the country.
And you showed up to sign up Or
I showed up, I
in
did
a
sign my,
Werner truck.
that's right, I showed up in a Werner truck.
We pay attention.
Good. Well, when you're appointed to the board, you get or once you're elected onto the board, you have a little budget to educate yourself, etc. What did everyone else do that was elected to the board? They went to the fancy KPMG audit training committee or whatever meeting, the National Association of Corporate Directors offsite. I enrolled in Roadmaster truck driving school. Why is that? Because if you're sitting on the board of a trucking company and you do not appreciate how to drive a truck, or understand what truck drivers are going through, or understand the constraints on delivering the service that we are doing as a business, or understand what customers want to see from those truck drivers, or understand the issues that truck drivers face when they're trying to get fuel, or when they're trying to park the truck overnight, or they're trying to figure out how to get their life scheduled around particularly electronic logs or other constraining devices that prevent them being able to achieve what they're trying to achieve. It's hard to sit on a board and represent them or understand the business. Same exact thing I did when I was once hired by the agriculture sector. It was a cattle company, a beef processing company. They said, hey, we need you to, I said, okay, hold on. I was like, give me a year. I'm gonna get myself real smart on this before you really get me involved here. What I did, I actually went and I bought cows. I bought some cows at an auction. I transported them to a feed yard. I got the feed bill. I got the accounting figured out. And that, by the way, is a nightmare by itself, all the regulations, the Accountant Full Employment Act. And then you turn around, you take that cattle and send it off to a slaughterhouse, and you get it harvested, and you get a check, and you understand the tax implications, you understand all the regulations. I was a better advisor and representative to that industry because I did that as a bottom-up understand. How would I be a U.S. Senator? The reason I give you those two stories? Same way. I'm gonna come sit here. I'm gonna go and spend time with my constituents because ultimately it's a representative position. It's not about my views. I can share my views because there will be times where I'm gonna be asked to make judgment on things where my views may matter. But for a lot of the policies of an elected official, it should not be my views, it should be a reflection of your views. I mean, ultimately, that's what this is. And there's, of course, going to be a balancing act between different views, sure, and my values will come into play in some of those situations, but there are going to be default operating philosophies that will guide me. There has to be a compass, right? And so those compass settings are what I'll share with you, but ultimately the process is spend time to understand other people's perspectives who are going to be affected by this. That's ultimately what matters, right? I mean, again, this is maybe a trivial example, but we were thinking of making a minor change to some of the trucks upon purchase. Might have saved a little bit of money. And I economically, financially, in any ways possible, would have looked at that change, said, yeah, it makes a ton of sense, we could save so much money, etc. And others around the table said that. And I stopped, I was like, this doesn't make sense. I said, why? Because what we're talking about is not a minor change to the cost of purchasing a new truck. You're changing, ultimately, someone's rolling home. Drivers are sleeping in these things. They're taking pride in these things. You take away something that seems decorative to you in the boardroom, they're gonna care less for this thing. They're gonna maintain it less well. We get such a benefit in lower maintenance costs for drivers that take pride in their vehicle. Spend a little bit on whatever it is, fancy chrome, something like that, that's seemingly trivial, but gives the driver that pride that lets you save in this longer way. All of this is a long-winded way to say my philosophy and approach is always to understand from the bottom up. I think of myself as a generalist. I have never referred to myself as an expert, ever, 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 and I won't do it. You'll see in my home office, there's logos, even my corporate logos, all involve a fox. And it comes from, going back to Archilochus 2,500 years ago, Greek poetry. A hedgehog knows one big thing, and a fox knows many little things. It goes to Isaiah Berlin and sort of the critique of War and Peace, the fox and the hedgehog, right? The idea is very simple. A fox knows lots of broad, not expert in anything, but appreciation for the context. Hedgehog, narrow and deep. I think of myself as a generalist. What that means is I don't fully understand anything. And I know that. So I'm gonna go listen to people who know.
Okay.
That's the approach.
So, two things.
Yes, please.
to the legs, home rule versus Dillon's rule, your homework. And I expect a 50-page treatise. But now the role of federalism.
Yes. I believe as much as can be done away from the federal government should be done away from the federal government. I really do.
Should or is mandated?
You know, I would need to understand, I would say as much as possible now. Should versus mandated. I mean, I think the default...
Lights, by the way, sir?
You want lights over here?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah. The default operating assumption has to be it shouldn't be done by the federal government.
Why? What is the underlying reason?
In my eyes, it's further from the will of the people.
Okay. How often have you read the U.S. Constitution?
Actually,
and I'm glad
it's
to glad to see that, because normally when I have my messenger bag with me with other stuff, it's there. There is an article in there that says exactly why. Now you're kind of paraphrasing it. What we are looking for are people who say, this is why we can do things, this is why we cannot do things.
I love the idea that all rights remain with the states unless taken by the federal government. And so that's, I get that logic.
Not rights, powers.
Powers.
Individuals have rights.
Fine. Yes.
Government has powers.
Yep.
All rights are reserved to the states and all powers are reserved to the states and the people.
Yep.
If they are not
Yep.
in the federal constitution.
Yep. Totally agree.
Okay. So, given today's context, what shouldn't we be doing, and what is it that the federal government isn't doing and it should? On the basis of federalism, vis-a-vis the 50 states and the people therein. As I told Todd,
what should
that we ask multi-level questions.
Sure. No, I can see that, and I appreciate it. What should the government be doing?
Federal government. You should always, if you're going to be my senator, I always want you to say, which level of government are we thinking about?
Yeah, fine. So you're asking what should the federal government be doing
and
that
what
it's not
shouldn't
doing?
it be? Yes. What should it be doing and it's not, and what is it doing that it shouldn't be? Based on the Constitution.
Sure. And this is going to open a different can of worms, but
We'll
go there. We'll go there.
Oh, yes.
I find some of the encroachments on free speech through technological platforms and some of the censoring logic, and we can get involved in some of that, and that dynamic, an infringement that the federal government should be protecting. The federal government should be protecting those rights that individuals have.
Under what article?
Not the article. First, free speech, Article 1.
Well, that would be the First Amendment.
Yes.
Who does the First Amendment affect?
Sorry, all of us?
You have it in your pocket. Please
Yeah.
look up the First Amendment.
Yeah, it affects, meaning...
It states right in it
Yeah, go ahead.
who the fence is facing inward. That barbed wire fence with little stickies at it. Who is it? Who is the First Amendment aimed at?
Prohibiting the exercise or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people.
Start at the first part again.
Congress shall make no law respect.
Stop.
So you're saying preventing Congress from doing it?
That is correct.
The government.
Yes.
The government. You started off on tech. Now,
Yep.
I understand big tech is censoring,
Yep.
but according to the Constitution, does Congress?
So I'm gonna push you back a little bit. I thought about
That's
this.
fine.
No, I thought about
I'm
this.
good.
So I will tell you the data harvesting that enables some of this big tech. By the same extensions they've used to suggest that, I'll give you an example. I was teaching at Harvard. Harvard is a private enterprise, and yet as a federal contractor, they were subject to federal rules and laws, etc.,
Correct.
including mandates. By the same token, one can suggest that Google, taking money from the federal government, is subject to should be abiding by federal government, is effectively an extension of the federal government.
They are a contractor. Yes.
They're a contractor and subject sometimes to the same rules. I'd go further and to say they are effectively stealing, on behalf of the government many times, information about you and your activities, and that you could even go so far as to say is a search and seizure violation if you want to think of data as owned by you. So there's a whole bunch of different things that get intermingled here, but I do think there's the connection between government and private enterprise is more blurred because of some of these relationships than has ever been the case before.
Understood.
But I take your point.
And it's called crony capitalism.
Sure.
For shorthand. But my point of the question is, to clarify, is does the Constitution constrain the people and private actors or companies, or does it constrain the federal government? And I am looking for people.
It generally constrains the government, but also as enunciating rights, you infringing on my rights is a role for government to protect my rights.
Okay, now I have to, sorry, Norm, but I'm going to keep rolling on this.
No, keep rolling.
Keep going. Define a right, please.
A right is something generally provided to human beings should be by nature.
Okay.
And articulated thereof as, independent of, they reside in me.
Okay.
Right? They're independent of some constraints on my ability to do things from outside government.
Shorthand, an attribute just from being a human.
Sure.
Okay. Because you said, when I would violate your rights, I turn that around to always think of it as a case of government violating my rights. Again, governments have powers.
Sure.
Individuals have rights.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you to shut up. Mm-hmm. You have the right to say no.
Yeah.
Which is what I do a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I have somebody who's threatening a lawsuit against me right now because I won't shut up.
Sure. Sure.
But for government to say that, for instance, during the pandemic, since we started off with that, we heard all of a sudden the Biden administration and your public health experts from their singular area of expertise, which when Dr. Fauci said that CDC decisions should never be subject to a court, is a prime example of that. Yeah, you like that one too when you're in it. That's a case of government constraining my speech. Mm-hmm. And that is what the First Amendment talks about completely. Mm-hmm. The contractor bit, you're right. There's a little bit of ooziness there.
Yeah, it gets a little fuzzy.
Yes.
Sure.
So, but that, it happens. It's huge. That's why we're an independent blog on an independent platform, because I don't want to be hosted by such an entity, because as we have seen in the blogosphere on the right side, it's very easy to get canceled in a second.
Yep. Well, speaking of canceled, I don't know if you read some of the stuff about me that was out there recently, but you may just get a kick out of this, so I'll share it. So for the last 13 years, I've been teaching at Yale for 9, and then Harvard for the last 5. In April of this year, I declared my candidacy to run in this race for the U.S. Senate seat here as a Republican, which in the People's Republic of Cambridge tends not to resonate very well with the others that spend their time there. Well, I've always been on an annual appointment. I've always been reappointed. And so I didn't get reappointed come June 30th, and kind of expected, because I'm going to be busy, I don't have time, it's fine, we'll revisit this later. Go further, I was in a process for a professor of practice position that I had helped them design. It was designed around me and what I was teaching, etc. And in late July, I asked about the status of that application, which was supposed to have been resolved months prior. And this the administrator said, well, the committee met, you weren't in the consideration. Would you like to be considered? I said, we've had my whole application pulled together for almost a year. Oh, well, you're welcome to actively apply. Only thing that changed between everything that was running normal and the present
was your candidacy declaration.
Was my declaration as a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And so we described this as I was canceled. So
yes.
Your use of the term canceled resonates.
Yes.
It's not illegal. It's not, but it states something about the culture in which we are operating and the influence factors on future generations, where diversity of thought, which is really what I'm trying to answer here, has given way to conformity of thought, if you will, right? That's a form of
monoculture.
Yes.
Yes, the people over in Cambridge were always rather snooty. I went to BU twice, so from across the river.
Yeah.
I got along better with the MIT folks.
Well, that's where I did all my graduate work, so I understand.
Okay.
I spent my graduate school years at MIT.
What was your major?
Well, so I ended up getting 3 degrees from MIT.
Okay.
My first degree was in international security studies. I was still fascinated by China and the risks of global affairs.
So the non-engineering part of MIT.
The second degree was from management, where it sort of danced a little bit on engineering principles and methodologies as applied to systems control thinking and that kind of stuff in manner. And the third was my PhD. I got a PhD in Innovation and Entrepreneurship from the Sloan School, but that split its time between effectively engineering, product development, those types of fields, as well as economics and strategy and business school. And
so you combine.
So it's sort of a little bit, so the answer is no, I'm not an engineer, but I sort of danced on the edges of it.
But you can talk the walk.
I can talk a little bit. I'm not an engineer. Not an engineer.
Understood, but you can understand engineers.
I think so, yes. In fact, the class I taught for the last 5 years at Harvard was called Humanity and Its Challenges, and its subtitle was Systems Thinking Approaches to Social Problems. It was an engineering philosophy class, and the idea was take engineering logic, feedback loops, connections in terms of lags, that type of dynamic, and apply it to social dynamics and sort of systems thinking and systems dynamics in social domains.
Further applying engineering tactics to operational research type of deal.
Yeah, a little bit of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I've got more questions, but your turn.
Well, I went to get my copy of the constitutions, and
he's a lawyer.
Uh-oh.
I'm the engineer.
Uh-oh.
So,
should I take mine out too?
Well, I think what you have to think back, it's more of a
I need to get some water.
Than your question.
Sure.
Is that if you look back to the debates on the ratification of the Constitution, the only way that we could get 9 colonies to ratify, 9 new states to ratify the Constitution was by tacking on the Bill of Rights. If it were not for the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, the Constitution probably would not have been ratified. Every one of the Bill of Rights usually starts out with Congress shall make no law. And it goes through a whole series of prohibitions because I think the philosophy of the founding fathers was that the rights that are being protected do not come from the government.
That's right.
They are natural rights that people are imbued with, and the purpose of government is to protect those rights against, oppression. One of the most important amendments is the 10th Amendment, which says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So one of the questions, of course, that we tend to ask candidates for federal office is that based on the expansion of the federal government into
everything,
every nook and cranny of our lives, starting probably with the Roosevelt administration and the New Deal. You know, the very first New Deal enactment was determined to be unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court. And that led to the Roosevelt plan to pack the court to try to change things, which did not succeed, but the members of the court read the polls. They read the sentiment, and all of a sudden, New Deal enactments then became constitutional in their way of thinking. So we've had this expansion of federal law into all sorts of areas that aren't defined in the Constitution. The Constitution says specifically the areas that the federal government is supposed to be operating in. Admiralty, relation with other countries, war powers, excise taxes, immigration, naturalization, copyrights and patents, things, federal law stuff. Yeah. Now we've had an expansion to everything in the world.
Does it articulate immigration or just naturalization?
It says specifically, it's in one of the other things.
Yeah, I remember referring to this at one point fairly recently, and I remember that Congress, or
the Congress shall have the power. This is Section 8.
Yeah.
And, okay.
Article.
To establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States.
Exactly. So it's naturalization.
Naturalization.
Not immigration.
No, naturalization.
That's very different.
If you were elected and went to Washington, have you identified any areas of the federal bureaucracy that you would seek to eliminate?
Oh, this is there's plenty.
This is always the constant question from conservatives.
So what would be your first target?
So look, the conventional answer that my candidates and a lot of people talk about is Department of Education, which probably I'm happy to talk about and I think is probably valid to do. But I'll give you another one that I wrote up almost 10 years ago and got me in serious trouble at one point. I wrote it as a blog on my website at the time. It would have been 2012 or 11. I'd just written Boom Bustology. My first edition of that book came out. I was paying attention to food and land bubbles, and so I delved into what it was that the Department of Agriculture was doing. And I wrote a piece that said, I'm not sure why this department exists.
Well, obviously it exists to make grants for tobacco and
even better. But Norm, even better than that. Sorry to interrupt. 75% of the budget were food stamps, the SNAP program today, which fully, and you can debate whether or not it belongs in agriculture. Even if you keep it, it should go in Health and Human Services. It doesn't belong here. There's historical reasons it ended up there, but it doesn't make sense. Number two, you have 70% of the staff, 70-something% of the staff are forest rangers. And we have plenty of park rangers that do similar work and similar skills and similar and many times overlapping activities that are in the Department of the Interior. Seems to me we can combine those two in the Interior. Then you have the remaining programs are statistical collection and grant making and crop insurance and other market distorting endeavors that can and justifiably should be held in activities in the private sector. You want to have crop insurance, like God bless you. The government doesn't need to have a role in that. It's a private enterprise that can and should be done. So right off the bat, I was like, I don't understand. By the time it was Secretary Vilsack at the time, who's now again Secretary, but like he didn't appreciate these sentiments because I went to their big thing. They call it food stock. They had this, 5,000 person event in DC, and
it wasn't in Woodstock, New York.
No, it was called Food Stock. Mm-hmm. They called it. It was sort of a mimic.
Yeah, that's right.
And I thought it was infuriating. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is like, by the way, walk past, next time if you're in DC, walk past the Department of Agriculture. The physical monstrosity of that building is overwhelming, and it certainly beckons the question of who's in there and what are they doing? Like, what are they doing? Likewise, Department of Education, who's in there? There's no teachers. What are they doing? Department of Education has 110,000 employees and contractors. A budget of $110 billion. We haven't talked about one teacher in that mix. In fact, their biggest deal that they pursue, or the biggest activity, is federal financial aid, which, from my study of financial bubbles, is demonstrated pretty consistently. Government intervention or involvement in a particular area, particularly in the lending of assets, lending of dollars, distorts the markets throughout and inevitably creates bubbles. Now, you can call it a student loan bubble. The other way to think about it is you created a higher education bubble, right? You got a whole bunch of dynamics that were created because of this. And now,
we're back to the overproduction of the elites, the experts.
Overproduction of, and we can even go further. Why is it that we got so narrowly siloed in our education? Back in the days where divinity was the overarching rationale for education, there was breadth, there was morality, there was a sense of duty, character, purpose to education. And I would blame Sputnik for this. Bear with me for a second. Sputnik goes up, and there is panic in America, and that we need to get money out to give research dollars off to the government. We got to get research done. We got to get research done. Well, how do you distinguish who should get the federal grant to do research? Based on publications. Okay, this person's a peer-reviewed publication. Well, so academics are not stupid. There's only 5 big publications. You can only squeeze so much through. The peer review process is rigorous. You know what? I'm an underwater basket weaver. I think we need an underwater basket weaving journal. It'll be peer reviewed. Look at me, I've published in the Underwater Basket Weaving Journal. I'm a world-class underwater basket weaver. Therefore, I need federal funding to study underwater basket weaving. And you get it. And what does that guy teach? Underwater basket weaving. What does he then want to do? Have a department. And then let's offer degrees. And by the way, the federal financial aid program will support it. So you can actually have this happen.
And maybe adopt some rules and regulations too.
Yeah. And get state licensure. Get some licensure involved there too, so that other normal basket weavers that practice underwater cannot, that they need to be licensed to go underwater.
The way that he's moving from topic to topic, maybe if he doesn't get down to the Senate, we should ask him to write for Granite Rock.
There you go.
This is how we think.
Is that so? This is how I think.
How we think.
No, literally, because the way I see this is all interrelated logic. If you stop and think, it's a way of thinking. It's this. Look, the whole siloed logic of expertise is arrogance embodied. It really is. It is the assumption that you know more about something and therefore I must know less, and you are, and then just as government overreach, so too an expert overreach, right? It's sort of, I'm an expert in public health, therefore I can tell you what to do with education. I can tell you what to do here, I can tell you what to do there, which it doesn't always make sense. And so I do think there's a problem, but let me finish up. So Department of Education creates a student loan bubble, distorts the education infrastructure, hijacks curriculum and all this stuff because of how funding for research goes, departments get ordered. The whole tenure concept is so antithetical to a business guy like me. Like I believe fully in competition. My business framework is organized always in addressing tough problems by starting with transparency, adding some accountability, and then throwing in some competition. Tenure is the opposite of competition. It's the definition of hiding from competition. And so, I think the whole educational infrastructure needs to be effectively ripped up and started from scratch.
If you get elected, you get the nomination and you were to get elected, you will probably find yourself in Washington probably in the top 1/10 of 1% of intellects in the Senate.
That's very kind of you.
That's the reality.
And we can think of some that are at the other end.
People that are well educated and in the areas that you've been educated in generally don't subject themselves to the rigors of the political process. And you're going to find yourself maybe a little lonely there with people whose intellect is very, very far beneath you. Yet they've managed to somehow game the system to get themselves elected. You may find, if you look at the spectrum of the people running in your race, there's a wide variety of
there's a diversity
there. There's a lot of those, and some of them have figured out how the system works politically. Some of them have figured out how it works militarily, and even there's the political side of the military stuff. So I guess, why would you subject yourself to this?
Because the way I answer this question, I really do believe this, is I have found my ideas resonated in a small scale, and I was able to feel like I had impact in terms of not only my family and small community, but also in corporate America with a handful of businesses. The ultimate scaling of impact, I believe, occurs through policy in a way that actually can fix and move the needle in the proper direction for more people. It's a sense of purpose that it provides. And you're right, the more I learn about this process, the more I think if I get there, I'll likely be a one-term senator. Because I'm not sure that this is something that, I don't know if I can play by the rules that would be subjected. In fact, I did this before I was an official candidate because I knew it would have killed the candidacy if I had said it, if I'd done it when I was. But I went down there and I talked to a whole bunch of DC senators. I said, listen, what happens if you don't do what you're told? Like, I know they want to get you to comply. They think you're, a vote in the column. What are you going to do? And the answer was always very simple. Well, you're not going to get reelected. Well, what if I don't care about that? Well, no, everyone comes here to stay and I said, no. I believe in what the founders thought. Tour of duty. This is, term limits. Come in. And I'd like to think 2 is the right number. But if it's 1, so be it. That's fine with me. I want to go try to have impact. If I can't have impact in terms, I don't want to go back for a second term. That makes no sense. I got other things to do in my life, right? That's not the be all end all. It's to try to go and have impact. So why couldn't I have impact if you think that the sort of swamp creatures effectively dig their talons into you and drag you to do things that you don't want to be doing? Number one, it's about money. So I really believe that if you don't do what you're told, you get cut off from funding, re-election sources, you don't get this sort of establishment support financially and otherwise, and that absolutely hurts your re-election. Fine, I'll tolerate it. That's a one-term risk, and if that's the case, so be it. Number 2, they will change your committee assignments. And you know what, Vikram? I see you're from New Hampshire. You really want to be on the energy and natural resources. You want to be on the small business. How does agriculture sound? We know your views on the USDA. Why don't you regulate them? Okay, we'll tolerate that. I mean, it's not the be-all, end-all. It's not good, but it's still one of 100 votes. Still have some influence, even if not in the committees that you want to be on. So I've thought about that.
Which ones would you be? What are the ones you want to be on?
Oh, I think energy and natural resources would be a really good one. I think we got to fix our approach to thinking about climate change. I think we've got real alarmism. I think that this is an absolutely insane situation that we have done with our energy policy that makes no sense at all. It is based on a boogeyman that doesn't exist. I think this carbon concern that we all have, I think is fine. You can have it. It's all good and fine and dandy. But at the end of the day, drilling oil and gas, energy independence in America will result in a better environment. Energy independence in America is better for the global environment. Why is that? Because when we drill, we actually capture the methane. We don't dump the drilling fluids in the water. Go over to Kazakhstan, Indonesia, or any place else in the world where the oil will likely come from if we don't do it here. Comes from somewhere. We haven't cut our usage down that much. So right off the bat, drilling here is better for the environment, and it's also safer for the world. It doesn't give our enemies power over us, as we've seen in certain parts of the world today. And so we went from energy independence to energy dependence, being able to export energy to our friends and allies, to having to import from our enemies and countries that hate us, producing in a less safe world. And in that process, we hurt the environment. So even the very objective that perhaps led policymakers towards this was fundamentally flawed. Fundamentally flawed. And then you throw on top of it these farcical acts like the Inflation Reduction Act, or poorly named. Poorly named is not right. I think it. Stop. I'm going to.
It was very well named.
I'm going to go off the operating assumption of stupidity on the part of citizens is overwhelming, and the fact that it worked. It reminded me of the Affordable Care Act. I was like, I don't have care that's affordable. Like what? Affordable Care Act, Inflation Reduction Act. You're spending money. Like, unless you're going to grow supply more than you're going to grow demand, which is impossible in this dynamic, then you are going to create inflation. right? And then since I went there because of the climate change issue. The subsidies to electric vehicles is beyond stupid. You know what electric vehicles are? They are storage devices. They do not produce energy. In some parts of the state, and definitely around the country, you are going to be driving a coal-fired vehicle.
Yeah, how do you charge the batteries?
That's my point. Coal-fired vehicle.
Yeah.
No environmentalist wants to know they're driving a coal-fired vehicle. Doesn't sound as green, does it?
Yes, the meme oftentimes is a picture of a coal train.
Yes.
And saying, fuel for your electric vehicle.
Yes.
If you read Granite Rock at all, I inhabit a place called Tree Hugger, which is basically an eco-socialist site.
Yeah.
And I bring back some of their stuff all the time. It's just fun.
It's stupefying.
It is very stupefying.
It's stupefying.
Because they're ideologically based, which
Yes.
means that they can
It's
never
religion.
be wrong. It is a religion.
It's a religion.
And there are a handful of us that ask very penetrating questions,
Yeah.
such as, how much is this all going to cost?
Yes.
Never get an answer.
It gets even better than that. So I did one of the things I've always done in my business analysis of different investment opportunities. I try to get to the root economics. Always the case. I hate the idea that you tax me to subsidize inefficient, energy production over there.
Yeah.
But even if you talk about electric vehicles, and I'm sorry I'm on my high horse on this particular topic, but it's one I really have done a lot of work on. The total life cycle cost in a carbon sense of producing an electric vehicle, producing the batteries, running the vehicle on even some green technologies, and then disposing and recycling of it. That life cycle footprint in a carbon sense, under almost every scenario, even including wind powered for the operating window, it produces more carbon for the environment than my Jeep does.
That's what the answer is. That's
Well,
what
what's
they
your
say.
That's actually true.
It is true.
We've done the math. I've done the math.
I'm saying
Oh,
this is
you're
your
sorry.
opposition.
Sorry.
What's your views on nuclear power?
Fine. All of the above. What's wrong with nuclear? Fine. I don't care. I actually don't care what energy you use. Let's power the economy. Because if we power the economy, we will be free. If it's efficient, if it makes sense, I don't want to be dependent upon Kazakhstan for uranium now. I don't want new dependencies. I want to use what we have, self-reliant as best we can, and I want to power our economy. Because if we power our economy, we will have the resources to adapt to whatever climate change throws at us. I've got a friend, he runs something called the Copenhagen Consensus Center there, Bjorn Lomborg.
Yes.
And so Bjorn will tell you, when I was talking to him, I was like, some of my students are yelling about the water level is going to rise and we're going to be, we're all going to be underwater. He says, I've lived below sea level my whole life. Copenhagen's below sea level. And it hasn't been a problem. Yeah, technology, adapting, these are the first things. Geoengineering, I've spent time out in Silicon Valley with a whole bunch of entrepreneurs. My PhD's in entrepreneurship and innovation, right? So you go to Silicon Valley, you find some real smart kids and you say, hey, guess what? We got a problem. What's the problem? Climate change. What's the problem? Too much carbon. Okay, we'll deal with it. We'll suck it out. We got some new technology. We'll figure it out. Don't change your whole life. We got a problem. We'll fix the problem. Right? As opposed to this fear mongering. I love Jeremy Kaufman's ad on this. I don't know if you've seen his ad. It's on YouTube that Jeremy made for his U.S. Senate run about. Have you guys seen this? I'll make sure I send it to you.
I haven't.
Oh my goodness.
Feel free to send me the link.
I
By the way,
will send you this
before I
link.
forget, because
I will
keep
send you this
forgetting.
link. It starts off with him walking in a forest. It might have been up near me in the White Mountains, and it's fall, and he's looking at the ground, and he's looking, and he says, "These leaves, they were once green. They were once green. We don't know if they'll ever be green again." And he goes over. He's like, "This tree, the branch fell. Send money now, or in 5 weeks there will be no tree." Right away, he said, he's got like this dynamic about it. He's brilliant. I thought he was brilliant. I was a big fan of his work there on that sort of poking fun at it. So I have spent a lot of time digging into this very topic. Even Obama's energy czar, who wrote a book called Unsettled, former provost of Caltech, has said, even the IPCC, if you go through it and read the footnotes and actually look at all the underlying research, none of this presents the alarmist scenario that the media has taken hold of and goes with. It's just not the case. It's not the baseline. And so what we have chosen to do is impose certain higher costs on our working families in this country because of this climate policy or energy policy. And we have sought uncertain benefits. While this has been happening here in the United States, China and India will have produced 150 coal-fired power plants in a 52-week period of time. That's on average 3 a week, roughly. Putting as much carbon into the air that will more than offset any benefit we come up here. And so they have chosen a policy of certain benefits with reliable energy to power their economies, improve the lives of individuals in their countries, and uncertain costs on the environment. We, in the United States, have chosen to adopt a policy of certain costs, imposing higher energy prices on hardworking families and uncertain benefits vis-a-vis the environment. I'm a big believer in technology. I think I just told you, I studied it. Innovation works. I'm never going to bet against human ingenuity. I believe in the potential of human creativity. I think we will figure this out. You know, my whole life, well, at least my adult life, let's say the last 35 years, fusion technology, fusion has always been 30 years away.
Yes.
You know, they would say, in high school, oh, fusion, look at this, 30 years we'll have fusion, or 20 years we'll have fusion. And then I got college, it's cold fusion, it's gonna come. And then like 20 years, fusion. You know what? Earlier this year, we had some breakthroughs. We had burning plasma developed and actually maintained for a period of time down in Lawrence Livermore's National Lab. I actually believe, and I'm going on a limb because you guys are recording, so there's going to be evidence of this. I think we might actually be 20 years away now.
We shall see.
We shall see. That's a fair way to put it. We shall see.
As far as...
But my point is technology. Innovation, technology. We will move beyond fossil fuels at the same way we moved beyond the Stone Age, not because we got mad at stones. We developed bronze, right? Like, we're going to move beyond fossil fuels, not because we get mad at fossil fuels. We're going to develop something else.
Yeah. The simple answer is I've been listening to the doom and gloom people since the first Earth Day, and after 50 years, not a single one of their doomsday prophecies have come true. And they hate it when I bring it up. It's like, okay, prove me wrong.
Well, remember the guy that wrote about the famines, that we're going to have all the famines?
Population bomb.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
Paul Ehrlich.
Yep. Right. Well, you go back even further. There's a history here. Malthus, 1798, said we're gonna run out of food.
Malthus
and then you get some sort of progress. By the way, we did this in the 60s here also, right? Because of mass famines, and then we had the Green Revolution. Like there's fear mongering constantly.
I need to get a couple questions in.
Yeah, please.
Actually, I've got a whole bunch of questions.
No, fine, whatever you want.
But now we're starting to.
I will try to do the best of my ability to answer your questions.
So we're going to try to shorten up the answers.
Fine.
What specific weaknesses do you see in Hassan's record, and how do you plan to attack them? And what specific strengths do you see in your platform, and how do you plan to hype them? Let's do the first one first. Where are the weaknesses in Hassan's ability, especially now that every time the election comes up, she goes from far left to
bipartisan.
centrist.
Yes, bipartisan. Well, it's just not true, right? So we know it's not true in terms of her actual bipartisan behavior. Look, she's gamed it, and if you go through the Lugar Center and actually look at the methodology for how they rank senators and why they count her as bipartisan and stuff like that, it's not on any of the votes that matter, right? So she will go and vote with Republicans on things that aren't going to pass anyway. The things that matter, she has a 98% party line voting behavior record. She doesn't think for herself. She sat on the Homeland Security Committee. That involves securing the borders. No success there. She sits on cyber. I don't think we're particularly safe from a cyber perspective. She's on the supply chain subcommittees, right, of the Homeland Security. The supply chains are like, are you kidding me? Like, we can't get anything we used to get. I'm on the board of a trucking company. I'm telling you, I know, supply chains are broken. Like, we have broken supply chains. You know, in fact, I would suggest to you that she doesn't understand basic economics. I would suggest that her policy-oriented behaviors have been completely consistent with a spend and tax philosophy on all things, always. And that's the angle we need to take on her, which is she is a tax and spend, party line Democrat. And in particular, the idea of living within one's constraints, of individual responsibility, and the freedom not to be taxed. If you think of taxing as basically stealing from me to give to you in some manner or form, then all of these tax and spend policies are de facto giving a bill to my children, right? Like she's stealing from the future also.
So
And
what
so
have you,
that-
what
so
have you
the
been,
out of control spending.
so what
the
have
border.
you been doing so far to highlight that poor record?
What have I been doing?
Yes, other than
I've
talking
been talking about it. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I haven't done much beyond that at this
Okay.
point. I'm obviously in the primary.
Yep. Well, still, you need to
We have
put some of that out.
we have plenty of information about Maggie's vulnerabilities.
Okay. All right.
Not
and,
worried about that as much.
and then the second part is
What was my strengths?
your strengths
Yeah.
that you see in your platform, and how do you plan on typing them, advertising them, pushing them?
Yeah, well, we're doing the traditional sort of getting my message out there. One strength I have is private enterprise experience, like living in the private sector. That is a major strength. The Biden administration, here's a number for you. In fact, I put it in a book and I'll bring a copy. I pulled a bunch of my essays together in a book. I left them in the car, meant to bring one for you. The average number of private sector years of experience in the Biden administration's top individuals, you know what it is? 0.
Yep.
0.
Yes.
You know what it was in the Trump administration? It was almost a decade, on average, for top officials. The private sector teaches you to be effective, to be business friendly, to get things done, to be efficient and productive. That is just not true from those who have never been exposed to competitive forces.
And I know the answers, but I'm going to ask you, why the difference?
Oh, I mean, I think there's all sorts of reasons why. The government doesn't have accountability. The government, the private sector forces accountability. Yes, please.
What is the difference between those with the decades of experience versus those that don't? What is the prevailing idea that has one pitted against the other? Why do people like Hassan believe they have the ability to control that which they have not participated in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a overarching power grab, authority of sort of, I'm not sure what you're getting at, but I feel like it's a different, business is a bit,
and I am asking the question kind of with, I don't want to give away the answer.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get it. It's almost there is a assumption, and I view it through the lens of expertise and stuff like that, and the arrogance of control and the belief in that you know better, and therefore that's why you are where you are. Sort of, that doesn't work in business. Market forces determine what happens, right? And so you can think you're the smartest, you can say you're the best, and if you have a bad product, it's not going to fly, right? You have bad ideas, they ain't going to move. In government, there's all these different dynamics, and it's filled with this almost. It's a power dynamic of I have authority, I have control, I have therefore the ability to impose.
If I say the great mind fallacy, does that ring a bell?
Yeah. Look, I mean, the truth is, I would almost go the other way and talk about the Dunning-Dunner effect of sort of the fact that sometimes people are so confident that they are unable to realize their lack of abilities.
Yeah, there is a sense in the popular.
So it's a different dynamic.
Yeah, in the practical philosophy of bloggers, there has arisen a lot more. A phrase that has risen a lot more into common practice. It's always been around, but now it's really out there because of what we're seeing called the sense of moral superiority.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, this I call it righteous indignation. Righteousness. It's this righteousness that we are right, we know best, we will do what is right. So righteous is sort of the phrase that comes to my mind. But
I was going to protest the indignation part.
Yeah, fine. It's they're maybe not the righteous is the part I'm getting at.
They get indignant that that's pushing back, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's right.
How are you going to win?
So our plan is simple. We've got a message. I'm a businessman, not a politician. I'm an outsider. I bring a diversity of skills and experiences. On a personal basis, I've lived the American dream. We've got that message out there as well. son of 2 working class immigrants that came here legally. On the issues of the day, of which I believe there are 5 key issues that I am focusing on, they seem to be resonating with Granite Staters. They seem to be important, and I seem to be well qualified to address them. So it's about getting that message out. I think, Norm, it's pretty simple in that regard. It is unfortunately disproportionately about money and messaging. It's about TV time. We have, we're one of 2 campaigns that are out there with TV ads up and running. I think there's, again, the 5 issues we're focused on is, number 1, control the out of control spending, or stop inflation. Number 2, restore energy independence. Number 3, treat China like the threat it really is to our way of life. And that is a critical sort of dynamic that involves removing supply chains, packaging up our philosophical approach to thinking about them differently and treating them differently and being less reliant and dependent on them. It also means, for instance, like multilateral institutions, to not rely on assuming they're going to do anything. They've been hijacked by the Chinese. When the World Health Organization will not investigate the origins of one of the most disruptive developments on the history of this planet, because the Chinese told them not to, we know that World Health Organization doesn't work. We can also go further and say the UN doesn't work, because if the UN Human Rights Council had any authority of any legitimacy or any moral standing.
Look at the countries that are members.
Well, that's exactly right. Right? I mean, like Sudan, or like random countries that have China was on it for a while. Do you think that they could ever label China's their activities in Western China a genocide? Which they are? No, they never will. And so the UN has been hijacked. I think multilateralism is gone because of that. The UN Human Rights Council, UN entities, they don't work. So that's number 3, deal with China as what they have, and that the implications broader than just China. Number 4, I think we do need to secure our border, but also have a legal immigration system. And then number 5, I think what's also critically important is we need to get education right, because that is the philosophy that we, are passing to the next generation. It needs to be respect for values that we want our future generations to embody. And I would argue that if you look at some of the indoctrination that's happening at different levels, not only early education, but straight up through college, my own experience, watching how diversity of thought has been squashed, that's problematic. I want to push back on that.
Okay. I'm going to swing back.
So I don't know if that answers the question of how I'm going to get elected. Look, we got less than 2 weeks now to this primary.
Yep.
That is a challenge, period. It means putting together a coalition of different organizations and different individuals, et cetera. And as of today, we just heard today, so I don't know if this is too timely for the recording, but I'll say it anyway. Just today, we know that Mitch McConnell's group is bringing $2-point-something million into the state to try to influence this sort of outcome, to choose an establishment candidate who chose not to come see you.
Which one?
I believe it's Morse.
Yes.
Yeah.
That they're supporting.
So
That, by the way, look, it happened to me also with, some people know about this whole debate that took place here a couple weeks ago. They
excluded you from.
They invited me, planned the date around our schedule,
and then disinvited
me. By the way, based on a more recent poll, you would have included me, but uninvited someone else. It's sort of arbitrary a little bit. And what I hate is this filtering logic of either establishment or outside the state entities choosing for us what's best. It is that righteous moral superior. We know what's best for you. Okay, you Republicans up there in New Hampshire don't know how to pick a person. We'll figure it out for you. We're going to put the person forward. You will just sit down and take it.
This is why we do gauntlets rather than debates, although we have all of the equipment to put full-fledged debates.
Well, I think all.
Are you a member of the Free State Project?
I'm not.
You're bad.
I am not a member of the Free State Project. I've spent time with several individuals who are. I can respect what they offer and seek, and
Yep.
In fact, Mike Sylvia was. I spent a bunch of time talking to him when this gun stock situation was hotter. I was going to say hot and heavy, but it can be hot again.
You certainly can.
Yeah, when it was hotter and heavier, I offered to just be helpful. Like I understand some of the views. I understand that it seems to be smoke. Maybe if there's smoke, there might be fire. I was trying to play independent. Well, he asked me to play. How can you help as an independent here? But no, I respect the folks.
Well, the people on the left tend to use the Free Stater red label as a pejorative term.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to I'm not aware that the Free State Project publishes its membership list.
No.
Or issues membership cards, per se.
Yeah.
But I've been subject to that, being called a Free Stater, but I'm not now, nor have I ever been. It's the old story. Are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Well, now it's the same thing about the Free State Project.
Well, that's true. I can say that I am not now, nor have I ever been a member of the Free State Project.
Well, this is just, again, the technique of using the politics of personal destruction, because during the Tea Party movement, everybody that the Democrats hated became a Tea Party person, whether you were part of it or not, and they were naming people, oh, he's a Tea Party or she's a Tea Party. It's like, are you serious? No, they're not.
Yeah.
And now you get the Free Staters, and now you're seeing the words extremism.
Yep.
And now with Biden's with a semi-fascist.
I know.
Very few of these people understand what the underlying definitions are.
Sure.
And that's going to be thrown at you.
I do think this identity politics is a real bigger, this is a destructive tendency we're seeing throughout our country. Harvard this year, do you know how many graduations they had? How many identity graduations they had?
Probably about 30.
Well, they have, total number of graduations was something like that, but they had 6 identity graduations. There was a black graduation.
Yep.
There was a lavender graduation. There was a Latinx graduation. By the way, Latinx is a term my Latino friends
What is that?
It's trying to take the gender out of Latina, Latino. So Latinx.
And they hate that.
Well, because their language actually embodies gender in all their words.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of, like you're literally taking away the Latin part of Latin. Like it's just, Then you had, actually one of the graduations, which I found particularly offensive, because I probably would have been in this group if they had these things when I was in college. They had a first generation low income graduation.
I'm so tired of
It's
all
offensive.
Of these
No, it's
firsts.
offensive.
And when you are because the identity politics puts you into a collective, a community that's nothing more than a group, and you no longer matter as an individual.
Not only that, it is literally the opposite of all tendencies we've had for since the civil rights movement got going, right? Let's forget color of skin and move to content of character. Let's focus on diversity of perspective, not skin color. And I get it, skin color affects your perspective, but we are going in the opposite direction.
Oh yeah, and I was going to ask a couple questions on culture war, so now
please.
Here we are.
Good.
This is the main one. What is the purpose of the culture war? What is the ultimate goal of the culture war?
Well, I think this...
Because we are immersed in it at Granite Crock.
Yeah, I will tell you, and one of my ads was about this, and in fact the ad we currently have up on TV is suggesting that the ideals of the American Revolution are being replaced by a cultural revolution. And I use, sometimes we say woke cultural revolution, but I like using cultural revolution to hearken, and I realize most Granite Staters won't get this. Now I'm saying, what happened in China?
Mao's struggle.
Bingo.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
That's it. That is what's going on. And it is destructive. It is a control tool. It is a way to divide and conquer. It is absolutely horrifying. I hate the fact that kids are being separate. I was just, public libraries here in the Granite State are now having, drag queen story hours.
Yes. All right, now I'm going to turn it on you.
To emphasize gender fluidity.
We at Granite Rock are immersed in the culture war because of policy JBAB, which is all over the state, and that policy by other names is all over the country, which is, transgender students and other non-conforming students. I'm suing Guilford because of 2 parts of that. One, they had, they're now trying to hide it, but basically it said a transgender student has the right to be called by their preferred pronoun and name. Now if you switch that outside of the expertise of the education system, that begs the question, in this Dillon's Rule state, where does this subdivision of the state, the school board,
right to do so.
has the power, not the right, the power
to do so,
to grant a new right to a minor child to coerce the speech of others, including adults?
Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Dillon's Rule. The state legislature. But now I'm coming up on the end of year 1 of fighting this in court because of, well, the school board's saying I don't have standing, even though I have adopted my grandson. He was now in kindergarten. And then there's the second part, which says that they had given themselves the power to lie to parents about the transgender status of their child in school. So if I called, I will not be told what that is. And in fact, during a school board meeting, I actually saw my legal son's principal sitting at my 11 o'clock after having a little bit of a rant, a reasoned discussion, because of 2 new school board members, one of who is woke to the max, wants to change all of the policies for pronouns. I looked down at Danielle Bolduc and I said, okay, what's the transgender status of my legal son? And she got all flustered and she said, I can't tell you that. It says so here in this rule. I can't tell you that. And I lambasted the school board and said, good, you just made your staff lie to me. How am I ever supposed to trust her again? How am I ever supposed to trust the other teachers or the other administrator? How am I ever supposed to trust you? You know, no sense of honor to say,
it's interesting.
We're violating parental rights as well as constitutional rights. With all that said, as I tend to ask questions, I talk long, but I put you in a box, a box canyon. What is the role of the federal government in that? From a constitutional federalism standpoint.
I think the federal government shouldn't have much to say here, other than allowing, I'm thinking about freedom of speech. People their speech shouldn't be constrained, and you're constraining the speech of teachers to speak in some capacity. I'll have to think it through. I'm trying to figure out the multiple layers here. There's probably multiple layers beyond which I can think through quickly on the spot.
This is right. Like I said, we ask difficult questions.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking it through, and I can imagine there are multiple layers of issues on that question.
Well, when you get the chance to think it through, we try not to do gotcha questions.
No, it's not a gotcha. It's I'm literally you're watching me and how I think and how I learn and how I absorb. It's not a question I've grappled with. But thinking about it from that angle.
Do your kids go to private school or public
So my
school?
daughter goes to Crotchet Mountain School, which is a special needs school down in Greenfield.
I am familiar with it.
You are?
Well, I spent almost 10 years on Guilford's budget committee.
Okay.
So that meant we had to process both the municipal and the school district's budget.
Gotcha.
And basically the law here in New Hampshire is whatever a school district has to spend for special needs, it will have to spend.
Yeah.
There is no way around it.
Yeah, there's also,
even if you have to send a child out of district.
Yeah,
and
that's right. Well, we were very nervous, by the way. I mean, my wife and I were very nervous about this out of district and residential placement. I mean, look, my little girl, you want my little girl to be put at a place a 95 minutes drive from Lincoln away, and I literally told my wife, can I sleep in the car outside for the first week outside her school just in case she needs me, right? But it was a scary process, but it has worked, and I will tell you, it's anyway. So yes, I do have school. She goes there.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with my 2 boys going through school. Yeah, probably not to the point of Crotchet Mountain, but in resident.
Yeah,
and because of the cameras, I'm not going to get into it.
Yeah. Fine. No, look, but I think there's a framework that we all, as parents and even citizens, this business framework I suggest is useful for interacting in these situations is transparency, accountability, competition. And so let's start there. You better tell me what is happening in that school for my kids. It seems obvious. I deserve to know as a parent. This is my offspring. Not a legal resident, not a legal citizen of their own standing. I have personal responsibility in my moral obligation to take care of my child. I deserve transparency on what is happening in that classroom, in that school, what is happening that I deserve to know. I deserve as a parent, I have those rights. Secondly, I want to have accountability. So not only are you telling me you're going to teach this stuff, I want to know that you actually taught that stuff. I want to know how you taught that stuff, and I should have the ability to ask about that, and there shouldn't be any concern. And then lastly, I want school choice. If you don't actually do it, I need to be able to go elsewhere.
Okay. I will take the rest of that discussion offline.
Okay.
I will not call myself an expert, but I have a lot of experience in it, not only personally, but writing about it on Granite Rock. However, we're getting near the end.
Okay.
And I always reserve the last question for myself, because I am the benevolent dictator of Granite Rock. I only have 2 rules for my writers. One is, don't ever write or display something that causes, it's basically adult themes, kid friendly. Don't ever write or display anything that would cause little Janie or Johnny to run to mommy and daddy and go, what does this mean? Because I do get the angry emails and the calls.
Sure, I get it.
And rule number 2, even though we concentrate on politics and culture and the intertwining of the two, you can write about whatever you want. So we have one writer who's a state rep, Mike Moffat, writes about sports a lot.
Awesome.
I have this thing called jettiness, which is basically how many weird things have people put a jet engine on? We've got an outhouse.
So one of my clients I worked for a long time was United Technologies, and they had a division, Pratt and Whitney, that made a lot of jet engines. And so I've been in jet engine factories, I've seen them being made, and I can assure you, there's probably some weird things that you put them on that would cause some real chaos.
Yeah, these are the small ones.
No, I know.
The real small ones. So here's the last question. Have you assembled too many people? Let me restart. Too many people, and I've got 4 or 5 names hitting my head, go down promising the same things that you and almost all of your rivals say, yep, we're going to go down, we're there to drain the swamp, and we're going to make things better, we're going to restore constitutionality, yada, 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 yada. And they go swamp. So for the last 3 cycles, I always ask the same question. Do you already have what I call a kitchen cabinet of people who know the issues, know the politics, know the strictures that should envelop you and keep us safe from you, and are willing to scream at you at the first chance that they see necessary? Have you developed that already?
I definitely have. I have a bunch of folks around me that I've worked with over many years, a handful of really trusted folks in that mix that have helped me, over the course of the last 15 years of writing weekly pieces, of working with companies, and also getting told, Vikram, you can't do this. The political process I've put together, even just in the last year of starting to think about this and doing this, a group of advisors that does hold my feet to the fire and stuff like that. I don't know that I have the inside DC know-how to sort of navigate that. So that stuff I think you procure. You will need to get the inside, the sort of tour guide, if you will, sort of logic that tells you, okay, there's a landmine coming up on the right, there's this over here, there's over there. But as a personal advisory kind of logic, I have an amazing group of individuals I've gotten to know and build relationships with over 30 years, several of whom have offered to come as my chief of staff if I win this position, to come down. One guy was in my wedding. I've known him. He's literally absolutely trust this guy with my kids' lives, and a moral, upstanding individual who I believe will always do the right thing and has called me out on doing the wrong things at times. Vikram, you're not in the right here. You need to back yourself down. This is not what you want to be known as later in life.
And are any of them New Hampshire based that know the politics of New Hampshire, especially those of us on the what I call the liberty and freedom conservatarian? Conservative.
So one of the guys who's endorsed, I shouldn't say endorsed, I don't think he's allowed to use that word, but who is de facto supporting and doing what you would otherwise know in political language as endorsing, but someone who's supporting me is Jason Osborne, who is, the House Majority Leader.
I know.
Jason's a great friend and supporter, and he's been another one who's helped guide me and tell me, hey, this and that. Okay. I've spent a little time with, just literally phone time with both, libertarians and others. I've gotten to know Bruce Fenton. He's become sort of, we share ideas and very collegial in that regard. And then one of my largest supporters here is probably as deep into New Hampshire with roots as any human being can be, is Andy McLean is on my steering committee. McLean is of the McLean clan, and his great grandfather was governor of New Hampshire, I think in the late 1800s or right around the turn of the century. His family has deep roots in this state, and he's got now his cousin he doesn't quite get along with politically, and that would be Annie McLean Custer. So he doesn't quite get along there, but he supports me. He's been super, super supportive, and obviously the McLean clan is part of the McLean Middleton law firm, so he's got really deep roots into full appreciation of all of New Hampshire. He's literally one of my biggest supporters and advisors. And then there's others, the business community. I've gotten to know a bunch of people. One of my other big supporters is a young guy who started Dine Corp, Jeremy Hitchcock. Yeah, he's been real supportive and helpful. But I've gotten to know a cross section of people in all walks. Drew Klein has been really helpful, even thinking about policy stuff and sort of getting government out of the way and let business and markets do their thing. But yeah, I've gotten to know a lot. I mean, the question I thought was, who is the trusted, deep personal advisor that I need sitting there with me at the 11th hour of a tough vote and says, all right, Vikram, here's your moral standing. This is what you want to be doing. I know you're feeling pressured to do that by those people down the hall that are from California. That's not what you are. That's not who you represent. You're going to do this. And the people to tell me. By the way, my wife is great at that too.
I know that you've come to the end pretty much.
Yes.
The one thing we didn't touch on was Second Amendment issues.
Oh, fine. I am a big Second Amendment supporter. I personally have a SIG 320. I love Sig Sauer. It's a New Hampshire company, obviously, but I've taken classes there. I shoot there. I think
at the SIG Academy.
Yeah, I've taken. Generally just a handgun guy personally, personal protection. I mean, I'm not a diversified firearms owner. I believe in the Second Amendment, but I have I've taken handgun.
Don't count.
I'm trying to.
The answer when asked how many guns you have is more than one.
Yeah. Yes. All right, but the thing I will tell you, the best part, or not enough. The best part, I think, of SIG, if you ever get the chance to do a scenario-based class there, have you guys ever done a scenario class that they have there?
not.
I have done it, but not there. With somebody from Gunsight.
Okay, I will tell you, that scenario class is amazing.
You're talking shoot, don't shoot scenarios.
Well, it's more than that. It's like, okay, you're driving in a car, and you come out and you're walking and there's 6 big people. Do you shoot, not shoot? So that's part of it. But then it's also, how do you handle yourself in different environments? You're going to go meet someone. They got this little urban build outs. You're going to walk around the corner and there's going to be someone who comes up to you. And what do you I remember the first scenario we did. It was a little bit disappointing, but I have to blame them as much because I'm at Sig Sauer. Like, I'm pulling the trigger. Like, that's why I'm here, right? This is, but we walk around, they're in some pretend pizza place, and the scenario was this person comes up and just gets in my face and asks me if I have an extra $5 because he needs a slice and he doesn't have money and I was like, and they're like, wrong! That's not what we do! No, but anyway, I totally respect the Second Amendment. I think
that was my last question.
Okay.
I wanted to point out to you, I don't know if you are familiar with Commentary Magazine. This is the latest issue, the lead story, school children are not mere creatures of the state. I have not read the complete article yet. And there's also an article here about Republicans pounce on the liberal media, which I'll talk to Skip about.
The media dynamic is a real
the media
problem.
dynamic.
I think this is worth, Skip, I know I don't want to go back and open up new cans of worms, but that connection between government and big tech is legally a lot fuzzier than people think. And I have heard arguments that have suggested if the government can impose, if the government can impose the things it is subject to upon its predominant vendors and view those vendors as extension de facto of the government, and therefore government acting through a proxy, you should be able to pierce that logic, right? If they are working through a proxy, that big tech can be subject to restrictions held on government. And further, if you do that, then Google, stealing your data because they got the Nest device that they own, because they have the Fitbit on your phone or
there
your
are
watch.
Nests active in this house.
Yeah, fine. So there you go. So they're stealing the data right now.
Okay.
So that you could argue, if Google does work for the federal government, that is the federal government. And if you think of your data as your property, which I think is true, we have now stepped into the fourth. One of the Fourth Amendments.
The Fourth Amendment. Yep.
Search and seizure. They are taking your data without your permission or without a warrant.
Yeah. Well,
so anyway, now I don't want to open that can of worms. I know we're out of time, but I think that question about constraints on government gets gotten fuzzier when the government acts through entities that are proxies, right? I mean, no one will tell you that Hezbollah is not Iran. They will tell you Iran is working through Hezbollah.
and the latest, another example of that, and then we will draw this to the close, because my wife texted me saying,
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
she ran out of pull-ups for Benjamin, so I gotta
You gotta
hoof
go.
it over to
Oh
Walmart.
yeah, I've got to get out too.
But basically, we found out that a government agency was buying cell data gathered by an outside entity, which the agency was prohibited from doing, but there was no prohibition of it buying it. It couldn't do it itself, but it could buy it.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Like, it's just
So-
the spirit versus the. This is the fuzziness.
Yeah.
You know what?
Data mining. How about all of the ads now for different personal capital? Just download all your personal information here, and you can put all your stuff in one place.
Yeah, no,
and you
thank
don't
you.
think they sell
Yeah.
your data, right?
Yeah, no, thank
Yeah, that's
you.
not happening.
Yeah, no, it's offensive.
Well-
this is what's wrong with politicians and career politicians and the whole infrastructure. They don't actually. This is what they do.
Yeah.
They try to figure out ways around things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Anyway.
with that, I'm going to say, Vikram, thank you very much
Thank you.
for spending 2 hours. This has been, as I was told by one of our Groxers who couldn't be here today, that he had listened to you and talked to you
Okay.
a couple of times, that I would find you to be quite interesting, and I think
Oh,
that
good.
has come true.
Thank you.
And, I look forward to being able to sit and talk to you again. You've got some interesting ideas
I
and
think-
all of that.
I think we'd have a lot to talk about. I think we could go on for another couple of
I
hours.
was with Jason Osborne on Sunday at an event. And
Oh, you were?
talking with him, yes.
Oh, good. At
And
Corky's
Mike-
house?
Mike Sylvia, and I was at Corky Mesner's
Yeah.
house. And I was, and I'm close with Mike Sylvia, and we have a delegation meeting tomorrow morning.
Oh, wonderful.
So
Give Mike my best.
Yeah.
Give Mike my best.
It's not going to be wonderful, but
No, I understand.
Yeah,
No, I
and
know.
I won't be there.
it's going to be the
You want to bring a camera?
county commissioners are asking for a supplemental appropriation of federal funds.
Yeah.
Of course, many of us in the delegation view federal funds as free money, right? Free money,
Oh, here we go
right?
again.
And it comes with some strings that make it
Oh,
less
of course,
free.
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, and the argument is, if we don't use it, someone else will.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I hate
that's
it.
the argument.
I hate it. As a budget committee member, I railed against it. So anyways, the process that we will go through is when I get home, I'm going to look at each of the cameras
Okay.
and say which one's the best one.
Good.
It's probably going to be that one. I'm
Yeah,
going to
'cause
process
I
it, put it
spend
up
most of
on
my time looking at
YouTube.
you guys. Yeah.
You're happy, once I make it public, I tell all candidates, you're welcome to use whatever one you want. If you get a problem in downloading it, just let me know.
Okay.
I'll get that to you. I will be starting the voting for the U.S. Senate
Okay.
among all the Groksters tonight.
Oh, good.
I probably won't get back to it till late tomorrow because I have to keep dinging people. Come on, folks.
Vote,
Spend
vote,
me
vote.
30 seconds of your time.
Yeah. And then you guys endorse someone. Is that how it works?
Or we do
Or
not
not.
endorse.
Or not endorse. Yeah.
So,
Fine. Okay.
we shall see.
Good. Interesting process. I've enjoyed participating.
Well, thank you very much.
Grok TV.